In our long and dirty war against drugs, we'd like to think that the front lines in the battle are drawn straight through the heart of our nation's schools. Just saying no has become as critical and fundamental a part of our children's curriculum as the 3 R's. So how would you feel as a parent if you learned that our schools are pushing drugs? Well, Rilla Cothran is suing her son David's Georgia school system for $13 million. She alleges that they forced David to remain on the drug Ritalin for 5 years. Valerie and Michael have a 9-year-old son named Casey, diagnosed as hyperactive. Well, Casey's been suspended from his New Hampshire school unless and until he gets back on Ritalin. Chadwick Rawlings, a straight-A student, was expelled from his New Jersey public school last year because his parents refused to keep him on the drug Ritalin. Now, Ritalin's not heroin and it's not cocaine, but it is a Class II narcotic, which, if abused or misused, can be a dangerous, even deadly drug. So the question these parents and others are asking, are America's schools doping our children? That's the focus of this edition of Geraldo. Thank you. Ritalin has proven itself one of the most useful and frequently prescribed prescription drugs, given now to about 1 million American school children said to be hyperactive. Now, in about 80% of the cases, the drug is apparently successful in improving the child's attention span. But that leaves 20% of the kids, many of whom have side effects like insomnia and bedwetting and stomach aches and depression. So the question to drug or not to drug a child is a critical one. Is that a school board's decision or the parent's decision? Can a school keep a child out of the classroom if he doesn't take his daily fix? Are these kids really that bad, that disruptive, that hyped up? Now, before we start our discussion here in the studio, take a look at what's going on nationwide.
Again, you see the Amazon River snaking through thick green rainforest.
If this bright, beautiful girl was your child, what wouldn't you do to help her go smoothly through childhood into a productive future? Sarah and her brother Ben have needed more help than most. They're among children diagnosed with ADD. That's attention deficit disorder. It's a learning handicap, which many doctors say can make some young children incapable of organizing their thoughts, following instructions, or even sitting still.
See, I couldn't pay attention to get my work done. So I was afraid to kind of go to school because all that would happen is that the teacher would get mad.
So you tell them to get dressed, give them their clothes, and they might get their underwear and one sock on, and that's the way it would stay for maybe the next hour, and they would be off maybe drawing or playing a toy or singing.
Ben, would you like to come and take your pills, please?
After careful consideration, the Andersons decided to try a drug, methylphenidate hydrochloride, commonly called Ritalin. 10-year-old Sarah has been on Ritalin for 2 years. Younger brother Ben for 4.
It helps me get my work done. I read a lot of books now, and it's fun.
Both children are carefully monitored by their parents, teachers, doctors, and counselors, who teach them how to channel their intelligence and their energy. Ritalin, which has the power to calm a hyperactive child, has just the opposite effect on grown-ups. It is, after all, an amphetamine, speed, and like any powerful drug, when misused or taken by the wrong person, Ritalin can lead to trouble. This boy, for example, 16-year-old Brad Eckstein, may have been going through Ritalin withdrawal when he hung himself in July of 1987. Reportedly diagnosed as hyperactive, he had been on Ritalin for 9 years.
Each time he would get used to the dosage or his body would be adjusted to it, then they would raise the dosage.
But the dosage was lower just before Brad took his life. Though Dr. Russell Barkley was not involved in the Eckstein case, he is a Ritalin expert.
Where there may be some doubts is the fact that sometimes, in a few places, some children are being given medication where other types of treatment might have been more appropriate to try first.
It has the same addiction powers, according to the doctor's reference manuals, as cocaine. And we're giving our young kids this?
Ritalin also became a factor in the trial for the murder of this boy, 14-year-old Sean Willett, beaten to death with a baseball bat, wielded by his classmate, Rod Matthews. Matthews' lawyer claimed he was under the influence of Ritalin, which he'd been on for 7 years at the time he committed the murder. His father believes Rod had underlying emotional problems, which no one, not even his parents, recognized until it was too late.
I blame myself for being ignorant of the fact of not knowing what Ritalin was. He wanted somebody to stop him because when they had asked him at the Gabler Institute where he was put after he was arrested, they said, well, would you, if you had spoken to somebody prior to doing it, would you have done it? He said, probably not.
This is Melissa. Though she was not diagnosed as hyperactive, her school strongly suggested she take Ritalin to remedy what they called disciplinary problems. Her father, though, resisted and placed her in a different school, where she seems to be doing much better.
Well, the school shouldn't be making recommendations for anything at all. The school teachers have not been trained. They do not know how to distinguish a depressed kid from a pre-schizophrenic kid, from an anxious kid, from a physically abused kid. What they can do is wave the red flag.
Why all of a sudden do we have a generation of children that are being born that are all hyperactive? You know, how come there's so many of them all at once?
In the case of 9-year-old Casey Jessom, both mother and school agree he is hyperactive, but they can't agree on the value of Ritalin in treating it. For 20 months, when Casey was on the drug, Valerie Jessom says he was impossible to live with. His behavior ranged from subdued to outwardly destructive. Casey's school, though, saw it the other way around. And when Mrs. Jessom refused to put her son back on the drug, he was expelled. Okay, here are Casey's parents, Valerie and Michael Jessom, the couple fighting that uphill legal battle against the Derry, New Hampshire Village School. Before I ask them about their son, let me say that we invited the governor of the state of New Hampshire, the attorney general, the commissioner of the Board of Education, and the superintendent of Casey's school to come on this program to give us their point of view. They've all declined. So they were notified, they were invited, they declined our invitation, refused to come on. So we'll hear your point of view. First of all, welcome. Second of all, there is no doubt in your minds but that Casey, now 9 years old, needed some help, some medical or psychiatric or psychological help prior to his being placed on Ritalin the first time.
Absolutely. We knew Casey had some problems. You know, I had suggested many things to doctors, and the doctors never saw it my way. It seemed like everything was the quick fix. Give Casey this drug, and there are no problems.
Before I know, really, in the bottom of my heart, how deeply resentful you feel about a lot of the medical attention you have experienced, or Casey has experienced, but please tell me what his symptoms were at that initial stage.
Well, when it was recommended that Casey may have some problems, basically Casey wanted attention. He drew attention to himself by acting out. He didn't know when to stop, that kind of thing. And it was then suggested by the kindergarten teacher I should take him to the doctor so he'd be successful in his first grade of school. And I did that. And I brought him to a pediatric neurologist who basically, they make their diagnosis by what you have to say. There is no examination.
He was placed on Ritalin.
Right.
How did his symptoms change? How did your son change?
Well, he went from being just sort of a, you know, class clown kind of kid, acting up a little, looking for attention, to some real severe behaviors we had never seen before, behaviors like stealing and lying. He also started to lose his appetite. He would have a hard time eating in the evening, coming down off of his dose of Ritalin, sleeping. He started to develop insomnia. I mean, the kid was literally up until 11 or 12 because he couldn't fall asleep off of the drug. And then he lost a lot of weight, and it was just a whole multitude of problems that just kept multiplying.
Did he, in your opinion, get worse on the drug Ritalin? Did his condition become more serious?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I believe today that if Casey was still on the drug Ritalin, he could be dead. I mean, he was that sick. It was beginning to cause that many problems.
There came a time, Valerie, when you unilaterally decided to take your son off this drug.
That's right.
And when school officials told you that if he was not on the drug, then he wasn't in school, basically, right? Bottom line?
My son was suspended from school because he rocked, he hummed, he gazed out the window, he didn't complete work assignments. He was in a mainstream classroom where we all had decided that this was not the best place for Casey Jessen. But when I would not give him the drug, they would not provide any special ed to the child. The few months that they did give him special ed until when we were working out an individual education program, he actually was very successful academically. Okay, they said his behavior was worse, but academically it was the best he ever did in the whole time he was ever in school.
But Michael, did the school system, did the state of New Hampshire, in effect, say you either drug this kid or he doesn't go to this public school?
That's exactly what they did. They used the law of least restrictive that's in the handicap laws, and they said that it would be, the least restrictive environment would be to give him medication and put him in a mainstream class. And we totally disagreed. We said at that point he needed some special ed help and no medication.
The net result being, is your son in school right now?
My son is in isolation. They call it a one-on-one, I call it isolation. He's in a small little room by himself with the teacher. He is segregated from the other children, you know, special times, lunchtime, and he's teased a lot and he's discriminated against.
Do you feel the school should have the right to order you to give drugs to your child?
God, I hope not.
Definitely not.
Charles Weatherly, a prominent attorney from Atlanta who has defended school boards very often in cases like this, although not this specific case. Why should the school have the right to order parents to give drugs to their children?
To me, Geraldo, the issue is not whether or not the school can order the parents to take the drug. The issue is whether or not the child is a handicapped child. If that child is a handicapped child, is presenting behavioral problems, the child, in my opinion, cannot be excluded from school. I don't think it's an issue of medication, and I don't think school boards should be involved in demanding that children take or not take Ritalin.
But that's exactly what happened here.
Well, I'm not familiar with the case in New Hampshire, but I would not, I'm very conservative in advising our clients, and I would not advise a client of ours to demand that a child take Ritalin.
But Charles, do you deny that schools, whether formally or informally, are ordering parents to drug their children so the behavioral problems will be minimized?
In the school districts that we represent, the largest being the DeKalb County School District in Atlanta, with 72,000 children, to my knowledge, they have never required that a child take Ritalin, and the alternative being exclusion from school. So I would deny that they are doing that in the districts that I am aware of.
Then how do you explain the fact that Georgia ranks 4th in the nation in per capita prescription of Ritalin to these young children?
Well, I was talking in the back with Dr. Nieder, who is coming on the program. I can only surmise that perhaps it's because Atlanta is a high socioeconomic status area and has children and parents have greater access to clinical services, and because of that, there may be a higher incidence of the medication.
Okay, I understand your point of view. Let me point out, however, what critics allege, that the teachers and the administrators and the counselors in the public school system have, up until very recently, if not to this very day, been, if not overtly, then subtly urging parents to prescribe or give this drug to their kids. Should that be? Is that right? The discussion continues after this break. Okay, welcome back. Our issue are our public schools, in a sense, being pushers of certain mood-altering prescription drugs like Ritalin. Joining us now are Joyce and Morris Rawlings and their son Chadwick. Chadwick was expelled from his school in New Jersey last May after his parents took him off his daily prescription of Ritalin. Rilla Cothran and her husband are suing their son David's school district in Georgia for $13 million. The district, she alleges, forced their son David to take Ritalin for 5 years. Chadwick, let me ask you a question. How old are you, first of all?
8.
8 years old, okay. Do you remember what that Ritalin made you feel like?
No.
You don't remember what it did to you? Do you, David?
It made me sleepy, so I couldn't do my work, or when I got home from school, I couldn't do nothing. I just had to go lay down.
5 years you took it.
Yeah.
Do you think it helped you? I mean, did it calm you down? Obviously, it calmed you down. It almost knocked you out, right?
Yeah.
Did you like taking it?
Nah.
Did you complain to your mom and dad?
Yeah.
Did Morris, did Chadwick complain?
Not really. Matter of fact, he at one time thought that the drug was going to help him because he made mention of the fact that in school, the teachers and children were talking about him and complaining about him. And so he felt that by taking this drug, Ritalin, that it might help him because they told him that it would. So as a result, to him, it was something that was going to make him acceptable.
Do you remember that, Chadwick? Do you remember? Will you tell me what you remember about it? Come on, I want you to participate here. Did you feel that you were, before you took the drug, did you think that your teachers didn't like you, or that your friends didn't like you, or they thought you were unusual, or that you should be by yourself, or that you were a troublemaker?
No.
What'd they feel? You tell me. Did you hurt a teacher one time? Did I hear that? Did you hurt a teacher with a pencil?
Yes.
What, did you stab a teacher? Did you stick a teacher?
No.
What happened?
She told me to give her the pencil, and I got mad and broke it in half to 2 pieces, and I slammed it in her hand sideways. And she said that I put in her hand upward to try and stab her.
Well, you know, that's one of the things they were saying. That's why they wanted you to take this drug, because they said that you really tried to hurt that teacher. Did you try to hurt that teacher?
No.
Just an accident?
Yes.
He did it out of frustration, really, because when I went to school the next day, we got a call, Morris got a call on the job that stated that Chadwick stabbed the teacher. And it was on the answering machine at our home, too, that he'd been suspended because of that. Well, I rushed to school the next day. I took off work and took him with me, and I told him, I said, that's the last straw, Chadwick. If you did, you're in a lot of trouble. So when I got to school, I asked the principal to see the teacher. I wanted to see the wound. I didn't want her to think that I was some, off parent or something. So they got the teacher, and it wasn't a teacher, it was a teacher's aide. And so I said, I want to see your hand. I want to see where Chadwick stabbed you. I want to see the punctured wound, and, I thought I was going to see a Band-Aid or a whole hand covered or whatever. But when she opened her hand, she had nothing in her hand. No puncture wound, no marks or anything. So I asked her, I said, well, I came because I thought that, this principal said that Chadwick stabbed you. She says, no, he didn't stab me. I said, well, explain to me exactly what happened. And she said that there was 2 lines. One with all the children walking in the one line, and Chadwick was not to walk, he was not allowed to walk, and is not allowed to walk in the line with the other students. He had to walk alone, but before the walking started, he had to stand up against the building, the classroom, and wait to be told to start walking. And when he was frustrated, well, the kids were laughing at him in line, because he could not walk with the other children. He got angry and broke his pencil in half, stuck it in his pocket. And so the teacher said, give me the pencil, Chadwick, give it to me right now. And out of anger, he just, here's the pencil. Not, like this. He just handed her the pencil like this, in 2 pieces. And so I assumed that he was going to stab me, so that's why I said that he'd stabbed me. I said, you mean to tell me you called Morris off the job and myself off the job because you assumed that he was going to stab you? So in essence, you're making an accusation that's untrue. Because I was under the impression that he'd actually stabbed the teacher.
Tell me some of the allegations, though, of his misbehavior, or some of the things that you admit are true about what Chadwick was doing in the classroom prior to the order, in a sense, that he take Ritalin or get out.
Well, they informed me that Chadwick was a disruption to the class. And because he was a disruption, that he could not be in class, but they had an alternative, that he could take this drug Ritalin, and that would calm him down, and that would be able to keep him in class. But we found that that wasn't the case.
What happened? You tell us. What happened when he started on this stuff?
When he started on the drug Ritalin, he became a completely different person. I would come home from work, and my wife had numerous amount of reports that he had started to cry for no reason at all, that he was concerned about killing people, about himself dying. And that was all that was on his mind. And he would ask questions concerning death constantly. Every day there was a question concerning what happens to a person when he dies. Am I going to die? Will anyone kill his parents or something of that nature? Am I going to die? All of these different questions always related to the question of death.
Do you believe that the drug was at fault?
Oh, yes, I know for a fact the drug was at fault. And how I found out, you know, the drug was at fault was, one day I picked him up to take him to the dentist. And you see, at school, you gave him one at 8 o'clock in the morning, 5 milligrams, and then at noon, he got another 5 milligrams. But I didn't, see, when he was with us on weekends and holidays and we did not give him the Ritalin. But, so when I picked him up, I could tell the difference when he was coming off of the Ritalin. He was unbelievable. He became paranoid. He thought he was, you know, he was very scared, very shaky. He was very nervous, and he was always afraid. And I thought to myself, now, I know Chadwick, and I know this is not Chadwick, especially this. But see, again, I would not give him the 12 o'clock Ritalin. And then what happened was he started talking about how he didn't want to live anymore.
And he's 8 years old now.
Yes, just turned 8.
Just so he's age 7 and earlier?
Yes.
And Mrs. Cothran, how long? 5 years, you said they made David take this stuff?
Yes, approximately 5 years. From kindergarten through part of the 5th grade. I took him off while he was in the 5th grade.
Now, describe, or David, if you'd like to tell us how this drug made him feel, react.
Go ahead.
Well,
did it make you happy? Did it calm you down? Did it help you in your studies? Did it help you pay attention?
it made me so I couldn't do nothing. I was like drugged out. I just had to lay there most of the time.
Would they let you back in school right now if you started taking this drug again?
Oh, he's in school.
Is he not in the general population? What's happening?
Yes, they've got him in mainstreamed out into the regular classrooms, and he's in resource. But David has a reading disability that has been ignored so long now until the psychologist, we just carried him to a psychologist that tested him and said David did not have any emotional problems, that he had a learning disability that had been severely ignored.
Did the learning process become incredibly slowed down because he was on this drug?
Oh, most definitely. David tried hard, but what he studied and what he did do, he didn't comprehend. You know, it didn't stay with him.
Can you read now, David?
Yeah, a little bit.
Just a little bit? Can you read as well as the other kids your age?
No.
I mean, if I ask you to spell a word like education, could you spell that? No? The reason you're suing them for $13 million, then, is the fact that they insisted that he remain on this drug all these years?
Yes, and that he doesn't have the education, and they're still refusing to address the problems. We had a due process here, and school officials even lied under oath, and we have proof of that, in order to try to have their way, in order to put him in programs that they wanted him in.
Do you allege that they forced you?
Absolutely, I have proof.
They forced you to drug your son as a condition of his going to public school?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's hear from the other side. Some experts, some other parents involved on both sides of this issue. Are America's public schools aiding and abetting the process of doping our children? After this break.
Yes, the children seem to be very calm and attentive on stage here, and I was wondering whether it may be more psychological rather than needing Ritalin or some other drug. Maybe it's more psychological.
What was the reason for Chadwick's problem, in your opinion?
Well, according to the school, he was disruptive. He wouldn't stay still, could not sit down.
But you tell us as a parent. I mean, do you agree that he was disruptive? Is he that way? Was he at home?
totally different. He's a normal little boy, but and as far as I can stop him, if I tell him to sit down and, you know, he does.
But you think that the school system, Mrs. Cawthorn, you answer this, rather than spending time in attempting to discipline David, just took the easy way out?
They just took the easy way out, and it was just a quick fix for him, because David was, in my opinion, a little hyper. I had carried him to the doctor and had him checked, and the doctor said he's seen no sign even of David being hyperactive. And they said he wouldn't do his work. He was hard to keep seated, which David was a little spoiled. In kindergarten, he was our baby.
I'd like to ask the Jessens about the doctor's recommendations. Were there any before they recommended Ritalin, such as dietary restrictions? Because I've heard sometimes with hyperactive children, if they're taking off sugars, preservatives, additives, that does help them. Did anybody suggest that?
No, no one suggested that at all, and of course I wish they had, because I certainly would have tried these things. I wish I had known more about Ritalin, because I would have definitely thought twice.
You know, I have a nephew who's now grown, I'm not divulging any confidences, who was hyperactive, they said, and who changed, my sister changed his diet, took him off things like bleached white bread or things with red dye #2. I don't remember the whole litany of things, but evidently it solved the problem. Do you think that there was not enough patience in dealing with Casey in a sense of trying to work through his problem and instead taking it this quick fix?
Yeah, definitely. The diets have a lot of success. A lot of kids are allergic to common type mainstay foods. Milk is a big problem for a lot of young children. Also, interaction is a big problem. A lot of kids just don't get along with their first grade teacher, and vice versa. The first grade teacher doesn't like some children, especially if they're high energy children. This interaction theory, I think, is applicable to a lot of kids.
Charles Weatherly, the prominent attorney from the Atlanta area, the defender of school boards in this and other types of actions. You've heard Mrs. Cawthorn's allegations that the school district in Atlanta took the quick fix. Do you agree with that?
Well, of course, I'm not familiar with the facts in that case, but it sounds as if that case is being resolved in the manner that it should, which is through the administrative process, which is a process required by federal law. And the parents have appealed that process, as I understand it, by filing an action in federal court. And that is the appropriate way to deal with the problem.
But do you deny, in your experience, that the school districts take the quick fix, the easy way out?
Yes, I have to deny that. In my experience, we have represented several school districts in Georgia. I have handled over 100 administrative hearings. We've tried cases in federal court. We have reviewed files in other cases, and I have never seen this as an issue in any case in which I have represented a school district.
Mrs. Cawthorn, your response?
I think he's been falling down on his job, too, someplace, if he don't know any more than that, because I have it proof right here at the studio with me today that the school board did recommend it. I have it on paper.
They told you? Who told you to give your son
all
the drug?
The teachers, every room that he was in says he's not taking enough. He has got to have more. Every time he would get more, they would say he had to have more. In fact, in the 3rd grade, when he went into the 4th grade, and they kept insisting, the 3rd grade teacher was recommending it for the following year.
Are you saying that a public school teacher took it upon him or herself to advise you on the prescription of medicine?
Demanded it.
Demanded it?
Demanded it. Said the following year, David had to be on the Ritalin. He could not function in school without it.
Dr. Joseph Nieder, you are a well-known child and adolescent psychiatrist here in New York. You are a defender of Ritalin use. Before we get to the pharmacology of the drug, do you feel it is entirely inappropriate for non-medical people to demand, in her words, the prescription of this or any other drug?
Non-medical people are not licensed to use or prescribe Ritalin. One must be a registered MD, registered with the DEA, No one else can prescribe Ritalin.
Humor Mrs. Cothran and these other parents then for 30 seconds, sir, and give me your reaction to her charges.
Okay.
If they are true, what?
Okay. It's hard for me to respond to that because I don't know what the facts are. I've been using Ritalin for about 25 years. I have never had a school teacher tell me that a child has to take Ritalin. That's my decision. A school teacher might be concerned, a school might be concerned, but that's the ultimate decision of the doctor and the parents and the child, all who must work together if the child is going to be on medication.
In your case?
Well, I agree with the doctor says.
In your case, did school officials, teachers or others, demand that Casey be on this drug?
Geraldo, I have a decision by the state of New Hampshire, never mind the local school board, by the state of New Hampshire that said it is appropriate that the local school board demand this drug.
Did they demand that Casey be on this drug?
Chadwick?
Chadwick,
Well,
I'm sorry.
actually, they did.
They did?
They called us in, the child study team, they called us in and had us sit down, and they said that unless he go into drug Ritalin, then they were going to have to make some other placements for him.
We've already heard that they demanded that David be on, you allege. Is there a pattern? Are public school teachers usurping your function, Dr. Nieder, and insisting that to have a non-disruptive classroom, that the kids who act out be drugged?
I've not had that experience. The teachers call me and they tell me that such and such a child has a problem. A little boy that I saw yesterday, the school called, they were concerned the child was not learning, was not able to pay attention. But they would not make that diagnosis. That's a medical diagnosis.
And yet all these parents allege that that has been happening. We'll hear from more parents, others in this audience. We take this break first. Let me quickly introduce Christopher Hansen. He's the Associate Director for the Children's Rights Project for the American Civil Liberties Union. The ACLU has taken up the appeal of the Jessens in New Hampshire. Do you, Chris, find a pattern of teachers taking part in this medical process, or if not teachers, school districts themselves?
Well, I think we've seen already today that there's a pattern here. I think the crucial question is who's going to really make the decision about whether to take Ritalin or not. I mean, we're not really talking about whether these kids take English in first period or whether they take it in second period. We're talking about a very important medical decision, and in our view, that kind of decision ought to be made by the parents, not by the government.
But you don't object to that statement, do you, Dr. Nieder?
That the decision should be made by the parents? No. It has to be made by the parents, by the child, by the doctor, after careful consultation with the school, with other professionals involved. It's a complicated decision.
Charles Weatherly says, Chris, that in his admittedly vast experience, he knows of no case in which school board personnel or teachers or other non-medical people have taken part in this process. What's your view of that?
Well, we know of 3 cases here in which it obviously has occurred, and I would not be the least bit surprised to learn if there were a lot more. Giving drugs to a child is, in fact, a very easy way to deal with a child who is difficult or causing trouble. Historically, drugs have been used in a wide variety of settings, schools, mental hospitals, mental retardation facilities, a whole variety of settings to control people, when in fact there were other ways of dealing with the problems.
But let me ask you this. Let me play the devil's advocate here, and I'm going to introduce Gene Harrison in a second, who's the founder of Challenge. That's a group that is pro-Ritalin. If a kid's in class, let's just say, for argument's sake, that Chadwick or David or Casey were extremely disruptive. These public school teachers, their classes are too big, they're hassled, they're harried, they have to do the most good for the most students. Is it really so wrong that the disruptive kid be taken care of in this pharmacological way?
I don't think it's wrong to deal with a disruptive kid. I think we ought to deal with disruptive kids because we need to be concerned about all the kids getting an education. I do think it's wrong to deal with disruptive kids by taking a quick fix, giving them drugs over the opposition of the parents. Remember, we have a situation here in which the parents feel that the child is in fact controllable in other ways, and indeed the parents are obviously able to deal with the children in other ways. The school district, unfortunately, is taking the easy way out.
What's the Supreme Court going to say? What are the federal courts going to say in the case of New Hampshire?
Well, the federal courts speak for themselves. I never predict. I never get it right when I predict the federal courts. But it would be my guess the federal courts would find this offensive both under the federal law and under the Constitution.
Okay, a pro-Ritalin parent is next. We'll be right back. This is Jean Harrison. She's the founder of Challenge. That's a non-profit organization set up to support children and adults with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That's the ADD that Ritalin is so often prescribed for. Was Ritalin prescribed for your child?
Yes, it was, and he's still on it. He's 17 years old.
How long has he been on it?
He was on it in 4th grade for a short period of time, and then there was a myth that at puberty you couldn't take Ritalin anymore, and so he was off of it and didn't start again until he was 15.
So he's taken it 15, 16, and 17.
Right, right.
And has it worked, obviously, the question?
It works. You know, there are a lot of parents out there who have children on Ritalin or another kind of amphetamine or I didn't mean to say I meant stimulant, or even an antidepressant, and this medication works for them, and there are lots of them. There are lots of support groups, and I do want to make the point that Challenge, as you said, was nonprofit, and we put out a newsletter of interviews with people, doctors all over the country, that can that have factual information, and is available, and they can write to me at Challenge in West Newbury, Massachusetts, 01985.
01985 West Newbury, Massachusetts. But let me ask you this. Who made the decision for your son to take Ritalin?
A qualified physician.
How would you respond if it were his teachers or his principal or the school board who told you he had to take it as a condition of his attending public school?
Yeah, I'd have a problem with that. I think it's a very complicated issue. I think the teachers feel up against it because they don't know how to respond, and the parents obviously should not be told by a teacher that that's not their area of expertise. And I certainly wouldn't want to see teachers prescribing. I don't think teachers want to prescribe, and I personally don't know any who have, but I don't take question that maybe some have. But it's such a complicated issue that we really need to present factual information where there's been some research, and there's an awful lot of hysteria about this whole issue of attention deficit disorder. And there are a lot of parents who will see a show like this and be very frightened because they have a child on medication and they're all of a sudden fearful that this child is going to go out and do something incredible. There are children who can't take it, and there are children who don't respond to it. And the important factor is that for the children who can take it and who do respond to it, it's a very safe and effective drug. I mean, you can't say anything is 100% safe. I mean, even aspirin, you know, we take our risks. But if you lived with a child with this disorder and you watch this child falling apart and your whole family coming apart because there's so much mismanagement, you would want to have the best available management for him that you could get, and that would mean an educational in the school, that would mean medication, and that would mean parent training.
All right, let me get a different point of view, another point of view. What about that? That sounds right, doesn't it? If you had a hyperactive kid, your house would be hell. I mean, you can understand how difficult it would be. I mean,
I've got 2 and probably 3 that would be diagnosed by most of the doctors as hyperactive. My 4-year-old Jason is an extremely kinetic child. I don't like using hyperactive, I like kinetic. They're full of energy. And we are using the parenting classes, preschool, in order to help him deal with this energy so that when he does go to the public school system, he'll be able to cope with the stress of being locked in a classroom for 6 hours a day. Let
me ask you a question. Okay, that's a stress, obviously. Have you had a negative experience with Ritalin in your family?
Yes, I was diagnosed as hyperactive in the 5th grade. My brother and I were both diagnosed, a twin brother. I started taking the drug. Within 6 months, I had the same effects as David did. It slowed me down. I felt lethargic. I couldn't speak the way I was normally capable of speaking.
Your brother?
My twin brother Gerald took it for 5.5 years. When the day we graduated from the 8th grade, he stopped taking Ritalin. He was taking 45 milligrams a day. Within a week, he was dead of suicide. Unfortunately, the teachers, the professors, the doctors are telling you all the good benefits of Ritalin, and yeah, it does help keep your kids in the back of the classroom quiet and calm. Unfortunately, they're not telling them about the bad effects, the depression that can be caused from the Ritalin itself, from the withdrawal. And then I'd be interested to know whether this doctor has correlated any side effects as far as drug abuse in adults that have taken Ritalin.
Don't answer now. We have to take a break, doctor. We'll be right back. Okay, doctor, just heard a horror story of, I guess, presumably the withdrawal from Ritalin after a long and heavy prescription of it. His twin brother, in the most drastic case, committed suicide. What happens when people come off Ritalin? How long do you keep a child? Let's say that it was right for Chadwick here, or David here. How long would they stay on Ritalin until it became something that was, you know, not good for them, even assuming they didn't have these side effects while they were taking it?
There's not a simple answer to that because every child is different. So that a child like David might be on Ritalin for 3 months or 6 months. He might be on it for 2 years. Very few children remain on Ritalin indefinitely. Ritalin I would put in the same class as penicillin, as flu vaccine, as polio vaccine. They're complicated medications. They have to be used very, very carefully with very close attention to the dosage, to the side effects, to the long-term effects. One has to use them very carefully.
David's parents say that he was forced to take this drug for 5 years. Doesn't that sound the long side to you?
That is on the long side. I would say that most children do not take Ritalin that long. One would always monitor very, very carefully the benefits, any kind of side effects. One would use the lowest possible dosage for the shortest period of time to be effective. Try the child without medication at regular intervals. Try not to use the medication on weekends or vacations or holidays. Use the lowest possible dose for the shortest period of time.
Which parent would like to respond briefly? Go ahead.
It's okay for the doctor to say that it could be used under controlled situations. However, the school recommended my child to take the Ritalin without an examination. And before you can make a recommendation for anything, you'd have to know the condition of the child. And he made mention of a number of other drugs that would be used, and they are not in the same classification. Drugs such as Ritalin is in the classification with things like morphine, that I've learned, or cocaine. And those are very dangerous drugs. And my son has been put on that drug to help him, supposedly, and in a matter of fact, it has hurt him instead of helping.
Take a break. Okay, Teddy? These gentlemen were kind enough to come on the program. They were on Ritalin. They are now off it. We didn't have a chance to talk to them, but I want to quickly introduce them. What's your name?
Edward, I'm 8. Frankie, I'm 8. 9.
Or whatever.
Josh Kreydatus.
Okay, you met Chadwick and David. We want to thank you guys for coming on. Hold it. Who actually wrote the prescription in Chadwick's case?
Our pediatrician.
Your pediatrician?
Yes.
So the school didn't write the prescription?
No, they prescribed it, they diagnosed him, and they pressured the doctor and myself.
Services have been furnished to the Geraldo Show in exchange for these announcements. Hotel accommodations in New York City provided by the Omni Park Central in mid-Manhattan near Carnegie Hall, Central Park, and Broadway theaters. Call 800-THE-OMNI or 212-484-3300.
I want to quickly thank all our guests here. Thank you guys. Say goodbye to your folks at home. Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
And now, from KCBS Television in Los Angeles, Southern California's most honored news broadcast. This is Channel 2 Action News.